All right, today's lesson 2, part 2, is learning how to clear the fractions. So I'm going to teach you how to take this crazy looking problem and make it easier so we can solve it out. Okay, so before we look at this problem though, I want to look over here to the side and we're going to think through something even smaller. All right, so let's think back to how do we multiply fractions. So let's start out small. If I wanted you to take 3/4 times 4, okay, I need to make the 4 improper, right? Okay, so let's make that 4 improper by multiplying by 4 over 1. Now I'm a huge fan of cross simplifying. Do you see those 4's? If I cross simplify or cross divide, I divide by 4 to get 1. I divide by 4 to get 1 over here. So when I multiply this out, I end up with 3 times 1 and 1 times 1. So in essence, I get 3, right? Because the 4 is cross-simplified. So if I were to add a variable, because if you look at our problem, we got variables. So let's sneak in a variable. If this was 3z over 4 times 4, the process would all work exactly the same. The 4 is improper, therefore the 4's will cross-simplify, cross-divide out to be 1's, and our only thing left is our numerator. Okay, so that is multiplying fractions at its finest. Okay, so we are going to do that within our equations today. Okay, so just remember, if I multiply by the denominator, all that I had left was my numerator. Okay, so we're going to watch that in action as we solve this first problem. But first, I want you to do that on your own for our first question. All right, I hope you got that correct. Let's slide it back over here and we're ready to solve our first equation. All right, so as we just witnessed and you practiced on your own, if I multiply by the denominator, I will simply just cross divide out the denominator and end up with my numerator. So do you notice that I have an 8, 8, 8, 8? So I have all of my denominators are an 8. So I'm going to start with this one because I have space to kind of show what's going on. If I multiply this term right here by 8, well, check it out. 8 will cross divide to be 1's. The only thing I have left is my 2. So if I multiply by my denominator, I lose everything but my numerator. So why don't I go ahead and do that all the way across? I'm going to multiply every single term by the same number. That's really important. If I multiply one thing by 8, one term, I have to multiply every single term by 8. So I'm going to multiply this by 8 so they will cross divide, bringing down my 3m, and bring down any symbols that are here to separate our terms. Okay, I'm going to multiply this by 8, cross simplify, bring down my 6. Bring down the minus sign, multiply this term by 8, and they will cross divide. Bring down the 5m. Okay, so something I want you to note. So write this down off to the side somewhere. If I multiply one term by 8, I have to multiply all terms by 8. So you do not get to pick and choose what you multiply by. You have to be consistent with all terms, okay? If I multiply one term by 8, I have to multiply all terms by 8. Okay, but the great thing is now that I have all those denominators gone, I can solve my equation. So going through that real quickly, I have 5m and 3m. Both of them are positive terms, so I end up with a positive 8m minus 6 equals 2. I'm ready to solve my two-step equation. So I look at my clues and undos. The variable is being multiplied by 8. The variable is being subtracted by 6. To solve it, I go backwards. I'm going to add 6 and divide by 8. Let's see if I can squeeze that in right here. Add 6. This is 0, leaving me with 8m equaling 8. And divide by 8. 8 divided by 8 is 1, leaving me with my variable. 8 divided by 8 is 1 on the other side as well. So m equals 1. Okay, I can check that by saying 5 times 1 is 5, minus 6 is -1, plus 3 times 1 is 3, and then don't need that variable. 3 times 1 is 3. -1 plus 3 is the positive 2. Okay, so checked out good. So let's try the other one. It's a little bit more tricky. All right, looking at this second problem, we have a bit of a problem because notice our denominators are a 6, a 12, a 4, and a 6. And remember that statement I made you write down? If I multiply one thing by 8, I have to multiply all of my terms by 8. And I don't have that luxury right now because they're all different. So that means we have to find a common denominator. All right, so here's your question number 2. What is a common denominator if you're looking at a 6, a 12, a 4, and a 6? All right, hopefully you chose 12 because 12 will be our LCD, our least common denominator, because it goes into 6, it goes into 4, and it goes into 6, and 12 obviously. So 12 is going to be our LCD. So just like when we are adding and subtracting fractions, we're going to use the same process. So I want to rewrite this term with a denominator of 12. This one's already done for me. Woohoo! Don't forget the minus sign. Plus, I want to rewrite this one a denominator of 12. This one's a mixed number, so we're going to have to do a little work there too. But all in all, I want a denominator of 12. All right, so starting with term number 1. How do I get from a 6 to a 12? I times it by 2. So that's what I'm going to do to my numerator. So 5a times 2 is 10a. This term number 2 is already done for me. Woohoo! Moving on to the 4. To get from a 4 to a 12, I multiply by 3. That's what I do to my numerator. Does this seem familiar? We do this with our fractions when we add and subtract. We just happen to have some variables now. Okay, so don't let this drive you crazy. 3a times 3 is 9a. This one, I want to get rid of that mixed number just because it's going to cause us issues in the future. So let's go ahead and do our cartwheel. So 6 times 2 is 12 plus 1 is 13. So that's going to be a 13 over 6. Okay, so let's think about that. And to times it by 2 would get me to 12. So 13 times 2 is 26. Okay, and it is negative, so the whole term is just negative. Okay, hopefully I didn't lose you on that. I had to make it improper and then go to my LCD. Okay, it was a little bit of work, but now I have a common denominator. Okay, and like we saw with that previous problem with the 8s, if I multiply by 12, I have to multiply all of them by 12. Okay, so we're going to go through, and by multiplying every single term by 12, we are losing our denominators. So you don't even have to write that step. You're just crossing out those common denominators and rewriting your equation with your numerators. Okay, so you bring down all of the signs and symbols and we're good to go. Now I have a multiple step equation which we've learned about this week. So I'm going to let you solve this for your question number 3 to see how you do. Okay, here's what my workspace ended up looking like. So add 7 and divide by positive 19. I was a little worried that we got 1 again, but it all checked out. Negative 10 minus 7 plus negative 9 is the negative 26. So looks like we did it right. All right, try the next two on your own, see if you can't clear out those denominators, and we'll talk about that in class tomorrow.